Hi, friends. Logan Clements here, one of your co hosts with the Better Events podcast. And this week's episode is a follow up to episode 204, where we did more of an introduction to freelancing and events. This is for more of our seasoned event professionals or our seasoned freelancers, or even our beginners who are looking to just look ahead at what are some of the lessons learned and the challenges you face when you've been freelancing for a while in events. So, we're going to get into talking about boundaries, burnout, a little bit of rates, even touch on taxes. It is a great episode. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Better Events Podcast. We're actually excited for today's episode, believe it or not, because we are every single week, but we're getting more into freelancing. We're talking about freelancing even more this week, and so we're super excited to have this conversation, to share our experience, then also just share some lessons learned and all of those wonderful things. We're going to get into business tips, all that good stuff. But of course, before we do, we have our conversation starter for today. So, Logan, what is a small, silly thing that instantly makes your day better, whether it's an event day or not?
I love this question. I will answer both event related because that's just where my brain is coming off of being on site. The thing that makes me personally happy is protein coffee. I have been buying protein shakes, the pre-made mixed protein shakes that are like vanilla flavored or even coffee flavored, and mixing it with espresso. So at the hotel coffee shop, I just asked for espresso in a big cold glass over ice, and then I would put my protein shake on top of it, mix it up, and it's just like made me feel really happy. And then what I'm doing for others that has been silly is I now call it Mary emergency chocolate. And I buy a bag of Dove chocolate that are just the individually wrapped ones. And it's dark chocolate, milk chocolate, and caramel. And I did it spontaneously for an event like a month ago. And it was so well received to just have this open bag of chocolate next to me at my producer show caller station that I did it again for this event. And trust me, the amount of people that used this emergency, I was like, sometimes it just takes the edge off. Just if you need some of my emergency chocolate, don't have to ask, just grab it. A little bit of sugar makes you feel good when it's busy on site.
Yeah, we mind linked because that's exactly what I was thinking. Because I was like, do I want to share something event related or not? And then as soon as you said event, I was like, ooh, chocolate. But like you said, emergency chocolate. I've gotten to the stage of life. I'm just so unhappy to be here where I have like epic sugar crashes if I eat too much sugar. But like a little piece of chocolate, that's fine. And it certainly makes me happier while I'm on site. Gives me the little push to continue on. So I agree. My second thing I have to say is, this is ironic, Logan, my cat. And I say that because my husband will send me pictures of my cat while I'm on site and it makes me happy. My cats, sorry, plural. There are two of them. And if you're watching our YouTube, or I think we're on Spotify too, our video, right? My cat is in my lap right now. So you can look at that little ball of joy right there, and he makes me happy. So there you go. They
Mary,
both make me happy. My gosh, I'm like playing favorites right
Mary
now.
has a favorite cat, clearly. If you're Mary's other cat, no, she doesn't. She loves you both equally. All right. We love a little. So tell us what is your small silly thing, especially event related, because I think it is. Everyone's got their things. So a little bit more about why we chose this week's topic. This is a follow up to episode 204. In episode 204, we really took a more broader intro level of how to start freelancing in events. So if you are just getting started, I highly recommend you go back and listening to that episode. Here we're going to dive into more. Think of this as like your 201 course. You've been freelancing for a little bit, and or maybe even several years, and you're just curious about how other folks are handling the different challenges you face. So, and then I do think anything we talk about from freelancing perspective really could apply to anybody who's running their own running a business, or even working for someone else. I think there are key takeaways. So I encourage you listeners, even if you're not a freelancer, there's stuff in this episode for you. So Mary, talking about, again, we knowing we came from that intro episode already, but how do you nowadays evaluate which freelance opportunities you say yes to and which ones maybe you pass on?
I think this is a great place to start based on where we left off last time. And just like a quick caveat, if you didn't listen to the other episode, or yeah, it's relevant for me to say again, I think, is you said, Logan, where you're at right now. And I think that's a key part of that question. Because we both have different experiences in this right now. I think for me, if I'm evaluating whether to accept a freelance opportunity, it's because I'm have team members and I'm leading a team. And so that is going to really influence what I'm saying yes or no to, because I still like to freelance. I talked about that in another episode, but it has much more to do with like, what is their capacity? Do I need to support them instead of doing something on my own that's freelance related? And what that looks like. So I'd say that our team capacity is what influences the most if I am taking on a freelance opportunity. There are other considerations, but right now it's more the time piece. And then also we like certain jobs or not, right? But that's what I'll say. Logan, what about you? How do you evaluate those opportunities?
Yeah, I'm definitely coming at it from a plan of like a privilege, I guess I will say, that I didn't have when I first started, where now I get more leads and offers to work events than I have capacity to do, whether it's more a lot of people asking about the exact same dates, which I think is such a bummer. Or just sometimes it rains, it pours. And I feel like I get a lot of requests sometimes when I've been clearly booked out for a while, and it's just unfortunate. So um, for me, I will often prioritize events that I've done before or clients I've worked with before, mainly because I know what to expect. And I think when I'm looking at new opportunities, if anyone I've worked with in the past has been a part of it or is a part of that team, that usually helps me evaluate, yes, I'm probably going to lean more yes. Where I have learned the hard way and I've become more of a this is a no or I'm not so interested in has been if it's a freelance opportunity to work for someone freelance wise in a role that has never been freelance before. And we're going to dive even more into this in our private podcast if you're a part of our paid Substack community. So that's my little plug to go join our paid community on Substack, where we're going to talk about client breakups. Because I did have a scenario where I got hired freelance and I didn't think it was a red flag at first when they said, I said, how did the person in my role before me do this? And they said, oh, they were full time. And I just kind of like was like, oh, that's weird. And then put it in my head. And then we had so much stuff come up that was conflicting because clients' expectations were that I worked full time for this company. Company did not want to pay me as a freelancer to be full time. So then that's where the conflict came in, where expectations are you're constantly available, but the rate was not. So those are like some of my factors. But yes, if I'm available, if the rate matches, what I'm currently trying to charge, and then really the people, if it's folks I've worked with before and I know I like, I'm probably going to ask less questions and be more interested, versus if I have no context, never met or worked with anyone on this project before, I'm going to need more details of the responsibilities and exactly what they want me to do, because we often use words interchangeably like producer and show caller, and producer doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So I've learned to ask better questions.
I love what you're saying, and it made me think of something else. So I'm in the middle right now of negotiating a freelance opportunity with a company I've worked with before, but the part you were talking about, Logan, where is it a new freelance role? It still reminds me of that because it shifts so much every year. There's just like a lot of unknowns. I feel like every time I get into it, and I'm at the stage right now. I mentioned capacity before, but where I have been thinking, you know what? I kind of want to negotiate this. So I am not doing as much pre-event work. I think that could be the compromise in this situation is I know what I'm getting into, but I know it's going to be a lot of work and there are things that change. So what if we just did, 2 weeks before and day of? It's better than nothing because we've done your event before. Like this is, I guess, for me specifically, right? So anyway, I'm mentioning that because perhaps while you're evaluating what opportunities are right for you, there might be room for negotiation. It just kind of depends. I think we'll get more into that a little bit later in this episode. But to shift on to our next question, Logan, what is something that you know now that you'd wish you'd known your first year of freelancing?
I mean, it really ties back to the first topic of like how I said yes to things. I just wish I asked better questions when I was first starting to freelance, because I definitely had I think I had more of a money mindset that it was either feast or famine. And if I said no, then I would not get work again. And so I would very quickly say, yes, I'm available and interested, and figure that the answers would come with time. And that is something nowadays, if you come to me with a freelance opportunity, I'm not saying that I'm like mean about it or anything, but I am going to ask more questions, mainly because I've gotten burned, to your point, Mary, of where expectations did not align, their expectations of me, my expectations of them, that I've just learned. My candid response now is more, I am available for those dates, but I am curious of what, the role entails, to see if it matches my capacity. Mary, you mentioned capacity, and that's like my main thing, because that's a nice way in my head of wording, let's figure out how much pre-work and what you need and when, because yes, I'm available those dates, but maybe I have a show or an event the week before or 2 weeks before that's completely all encompassing. So I'm essentially out of the office for your show. Those are all the unsaid things when I say, let's talk about capacity. So that is something that I'd wish I'd known. I also wish I'd factored more in how much more time it takes to work as a freelancer when they want you to have an email address and a Slack and all of these ways to communicate with them that are native to whoever you're freelancing to. Again, something I'm happy to do. I think at this current moment in time, I think I have 6 emails that I have to monitor. Luckily, 1 or 2 is getting phased out in the next week, but it is a lot. And so that alone takes more time than if you're using my Logan Strategy Group email and just like, that's what I have to track, because that's one inbox where all my other stuff comes. And I just think I wish I'd factored that in more when I was trying to estimate how much time I needed for certain projects. So that was really 2 answers. I cheated, Mary. I did 2, but
How dare you?
I feel like they were a helpful 2.
They were helpful too, most certainly. Yeah, and I think mine's kind of a different line of thought, which is also, I think it's good. We have all the perspectives here, but I agree with what you said most certainly. Um, I think I wish I would have known that as an event professional, you can potentially get more opportunities if you're willing to freelance. Maybe I should word that differently. You could try different areas of the industry by freelancing. So maybe my piece of advice there is like, if you are interested in doing corporate events or sports or VIP work or incentives or something like that, or you don't know what you want to do, then freelancing is a great thing to do because you can figure that out. And there's so many opportunities to take you places so that you can figure that out. So hopefully I'm wording this well. I think you know what I'm saying, Logan, but that is something that I wish I had known at the beginning, because the industry seems so vast and there's still so many parts that I don't understand because it's such a big industry. And so freelancing helps open that up a little bit more to you, I think. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think that's a great point for anybody who's looking to try something new. You can also freelance on the side. I mean, look at your employment contract. I think we had a question in a past episode where we went into more in depth on this. But it is a great way, if you're thinking about transitioning to another part of the industry, doing a role freelance helps you get that experience before you just decide on paper, oh, this sounds cool. And then you do it and you're like, I actually don't like that at all. I know Mary has been candid with me that there's a role I got her to freelance with me on. And then she came out and went, yeah, that was a great experience. I learned a lot. And I don't think I will be doing roles like that in the future. And I appreciate you for that, Mary.
And I truly appreciate the opportunity, because I never would have known that if I hadn't
Yeah,
tried it. And so, yeah. And also, just as like a side, I got like more of a view into what you do. And that was also super cool. So there's pros and cons, of course.
totally. Our next question would be how, Mary, from a freelance perspective, and I know your business, you're not necessarily entirely freelance right now. So maybe put yourself before you had employees, of how did you handle slow seasons, or better yet, how do you plan for slow seasons? Or I guess you could speak to it from your current perspective as well.
Yeah, I think it probably is a semi-similar problem as it was at the beginning, and that's that the typical type of freelance work that I do, which before I even had employees was still nonprofit type of work, is mostly seasonal. And so I very much have always been busy in the spring and the fall, summer and end of year, but mostly summer has always been like my big issue time of year. And so freelancing, I think, gives the opportunity to, like I said before, try other things or fill that time with other opportunities. So perhaps it would be great for you to jump over to certain types of corporate events during the summer, or maybe you could freelance festivals. And that is actually something that at the beginning, I wasn't really trying to figure that out, to be honest. I just noticed that there was a slow time and kind of an ebb and flow to freelancing times for me. And so it's something I am still figuring it out. I noticed the trend from the beginning. So I think it's a thing that was a thing for me in freelancing. But yeah, expanding into other types of events can help fill that time. And so long story short, I'm still figuring it out. So Logan, what about you? We're looking forward to learning from you on this one too. What are some ways that you handle the slow seasons?
Yeah, it really varies because, again, like I said, I'm in a good spot right now business wise, that if anything now I have to like make slow seasons happen for me. I have less of to me, it's not so much a work slow season. It's I will have a financially slow season, which just means based on how long it takes certain people to pay me, I could be working my butt off, but I'm not getting those invoices paid for another month or two. So I have gotten a lot better at financially planning for slow seasons, meaning I do better projections, not just of what I'm in. I used to do it based on what I invoiced for. Now I do projections based on when I receive the money. So like right now I could tell you right now, looking at my projections, like in September, I already know for this year in September, I'm not expecting as much cash into my business during that month. I'm busy, but I'm not getting those invoices paid during that month. So I need to plan ahead. And we've talked about it too. Again, themes that come up all the time, that profit first book. I used to pay myself a percentage of what I made. So if I had a really good month, I would pay myself a lot. That percentage was a big chunk. And then if I had a bad month, that percentage was really low. And I found personally that was really hard to balance my own personal expenses. And Shannon Doe, a friend of the pod, on Mary's lovely Vet Pros on the Go retreat last January in 2024, suggested I kindly reread a chapter because maybe I wasn't interpreting the book as it was intended, and that was true. And I went back, and I should be paying myself consistently. So now what I do is I went what I want to make over the entire year, and I pay myself the same amount every 2 weeks as a freelancer. And the idea being, if I have a really good month money wise, I now put that extra money in a holding account so that when I have a slower month, I can still have that. I have that cash reserve to pay myself the same every month, no matter what's coming in. And that has helped me a lot as a freelancer. So it was a little less feast or famine, where I'd have a 5-figure month, then I'd have a 3-figure month where I'm only making a couple $100. Then I would have another huge month. And that flux was really hard. So there's no one answer or one way to do it, but I found calculating that and then being consistent with what I pay myself has been helpful.
Yeah, it's been cool to see your profit first journey, like most certainly to see that play out. One other really quick tip for the business related side of this point is maybe you're not trying to fill your slow season. Like, what if you're in a situation where you actually are okay with that? We have one, friend of the pod, and recent guest, Alicia. Alicia does a lot of freelancing as well. Shout out to Alicia. And something that I think she does really well is reaching out to, fellow event pros, and she's networking during certain times. And so you can take advantage, if you don't need to fill that time with an event, of setting yourself up for the future seasons and just meeting people, or writing down the types of events that you would like to be involved in eventually. So I just want to shout out to those that maybe don't need to fill all their time for whatever situation you're in. There's still lots of things you can do to help grow that freelance business side without doing an event. Okay, Logan, when and how do you know that it's time to raise your rates?
Oh, this is, no matter how long I've been freelancing, I feel like this is always a tough question. It just is. When you know how it's time to raise your rates, I feel like most people do this annually, as you do when you get other vendor quotes for your events and things. Usually their pricing for 2025 is going to be maybe slightly lower than what it will be for 2026 because inflation is real. I think the hard part with freelancing and why rates in general are just difficult is it feels very personal. Like Logan, the freelancer, when I say my rate is $95 an hour, I am putting a dollar value on like what I personally am worth. And I think that can just feel, that's like not necessarily true, but that's how it can feel. And so it's a challenge, I would say, to know when to raise your rates, because it just feels hard to even set your rates or what is the right rate. I will say for podcast listeners, I have not raised my rates for multiple people in several years. And so Mary's already been on the receiving end of this, that I've decided for 2026, I need to increase my rates, because I look back and went, oh, dang, I've been charging the same thing for this service since 2022. And like, again, inflation is a real thing. And so again, I'm doing in my mind, small incremental increase. But It has definitely felt more dramatic for me personally. And I've just been sending in emails to folks as they ask about next year in 2026. I just add that as a sentence of like, just to give you a heads up, my rates are going to get slightly adjusted for any 2026 projects. And just to make it easier, if I'm working on your event now in 2025, but the event's in 26, it would apply to that just to be consistent. But yeah, so I think just figuring out what works for you, because I don't think I necessarily made a mistake by not raising them for a couple years. It's more that I'm at a point where I'm getting busy enough that I kind of need to raise my rates to help supplement some of the like lower rate things that I do for certain folks. But also just because I'm getting busier. So I have the experience now that I can start charging a little more. So Mary, how would you answer that question? When do you know it's time to raise your rates?
I agree with everything you said, of course. But one of the things also is I'm trying to track my hours more when I'm doing freelance events specifically, because those are the ones that to me have the most scope creep as well. And so really trying to track my time. And so with that, I have the data to be able to go back the next year and say like, hey, like the rate really isn't fair for the amount of hours that this requires. And I can prove it to you. And so that's something that I'm actually trying to work on right now and try to advocate for more for that. Plus I'm like not personally like, no, I don't know if I'm like thrilled for the role. So I'm like, I absolutely need this rate increase if we're even going to talk about this. So yeah, what you said and that absolutely.
Which that's a good pro tip, Mary, because I will say we've talked about this. There is whether you get more busy or it's maybe a client that is just difficult, you are within your right to charge whatever you want to charge. And we were talking about a quote that we'd gotten for another event where it was clearly the vendor didn't want to do it, but they didn't want to say no, so they just charged a lot. And it was like, okay, we're not going to use you because you're charging so much. But that's kind of like the soft no you can give is if it is a project that maybe you aren't necessarily super thrilled about, but it's like, let me just throw out, that's like also a good testing ground for a higher rate. It's like, let me just throw out 20% more than I normally charge. Let's see what they say. Hard part is you just have to be willing to do the project if they say yes. But I have heard that is a way that if you're someone who normally charges $60 an hour and you're like, let me just quote 90 and see what they say. And they say yes, that's kind of a good thing for you. You're making more money, but you then, yes, are on the hook for doing it at that, doing that event. But Mary, you mentioned this a little bit, so this is a good transition for our next question. But how do you deal with scope creep or unclear boundaries when you're already mid-project as a freelancer?
Well, I think the key thing about this question is the mid-project piece, it's like that's when you're like, oh no, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, which I think we do, all of us run into that probably more than we would like. Unfortunately, I do think sometimes it's just the nature of our jobs because they're so vast and there's like so much to it. So this is like the situation where you can't necessarily go back. You can make notes for next year, right? You're like, next year I know what this is going to include or how much time it takes. But if you're literally mid-project, that's just tough. So I would say if you don't advocate from the first point that you see that happening, if it's mid-project or closer to the beginning or whenever, then you're kind of screwing yourself over for the rest of that scope, like, because if I was a client, I'd kind of be like, I don't know. Like, why are you advocating for this, but not this other thing? So I think you're doing yourself a service if you catch it when it happens and you bring it up then. And that's when you can agree. Do you want to be a stickler on it? Or do you want to say like, hey, I'm just letting you know that this is not in our scope. I'm going to help you out anyway, but at least like you've communicated that. And then if it continues to happen, you're continuing to raise these red flags. So I do feel, and I'm a people pleaser and I do not like confrontation, but I do feel that you are going to do yourself so much a disservice if you do not track this or bring it up to people, because this is going to be the same thing that affects somebody else even if you don't work this role again. And so it's just better for the industry, it's better for the event. Those are my thoughts. Logan, I think you would agree with what I said, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and there's no, to me, I don't have the same answer to this question for every client and every project I do. I feel like I've gotten better the longer I've been in the industry and doing freelance to avoid scope creep, but it still happens. And I guess I would answer this. I definitely do the same as you're saying when we're in that final stretch. Like if it's the week of the event, I have gotten good enough now with a lot of my scopes that I would openly say, hey, this isn't in our original scope, but I understand we're in the final 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. I'm happy to do this. And we can talk about adding this for next year. And I actually did that to one client and they said, they're like, oh no, we'll add to your scope. Like they were like, we'll pay for this because we want to. And you should be compensated because sure, it's not added. And that was something where I actually got more money for that project in a way that I was going to write it off this year and say, okay, but it's definitely included next year. But I also have kind of a sadder tale from this year where I had a client that we agreed on a project rate, and I'd advocated from the start of the project. I said, oh, this is really tough because you want to include travel and on-site dates in this just inclusive project rate for this multi-month contract. And they said, that's just how we want to do it. Like I advocated to see if we could break it out, and they didn't want to do that. So we said, okay, we did it. Well, turns out they needed a lot more travel and a lot more support. And I just did it, listeners. I didn't stop. I didn't say, wait, we need to stop and hold up. And I just, in my mind, I let it happen because I was investing in the long-term relationship for this project. And I really want to continue working with them. And I will say probably fear got the better side of me, that if I'd said, no, wait, stop, let's talk about this scope creep, I was worried about losing some of that added responsibility. It was fun to get to do some of it. But then post-event has been really tough to actually go back and be like, whoa, wow, how many hours I went over of everything I did. So I'm not saying I did the right thing, but it is something. I'm 8.5 years in business and I'm still having this happen. And I just am glad that I'm like Mary, I track my time so I can at least go back and challenge my assumptions I'd made for myself of like, oh, it was just a little more. And no, it was a lot more. So I'm not the perfect person with scope creep, but I'm getting better.
It's a long time. It's just a lifelong struggle that we're all going to be doing better on. So listeners, if you have tips and tricks on scope creep, it's the forever question. Please send us those. We'd love to hear your thoughts and tips on all of that. Logan, do you ever turn down freelance work? And maybe we know the answer to this based on what you've already shared, but what helps you decide what you're turning down? Like, because you have a capacity. So what are you accepting versus turning down, and how do you decide?
Yeah, I'm only one person. And that's, again, the argument. I'm sure there's some of you listeners being like, well, Logan, you should just start hiring people. Yes, that is an option. I could totally do that. But I will say a lot of the freelance work I get are people who want to work with me as Logan. And so getting referred to somebody else is not necessarily what they want. So yes, I do turn down freelance work. I am trying to get better at my personal capacity and understanding truly what I can take on at one time, especially I think I'm getting better now. I'm taking on more day of roles, like just on-site roles, meaning maybe I have a call or two in the lead up to the event, but then when I show up, I'm all yours on site for those amount of days, like my show caller work. A lot of that is limited prep work. And I'm learning I can say yes to more of those versus any heavy show that is really like hundreds of hours of prep work or 100 hours of prep work. That is just going to impact my capacity to do anything else, because I'm trying to avoid having long days where I'm on site for an event and then up until like midnight, 1 a.m. doing other work because I still need to do work on other things. I'm working on that. That's a process for me. But what helps me decide is, just really trying to understand, get better idea of the commitment. So am I available? The dates is the first one. And then how much prep work are they looking for? And then is it a role or a client or an event that I'm really excited about? And then figuring out if all of those are yeses, then it's just more understanding, like, let me zoom out and see what do I have before then and after then, and would what they're looking for fit in this spot that I have available. And again, I feel like a lot of times I'm getting asked for this for overlapping dates, which is just a bummer. And I know other people can relate to this, where it seems like everyone wants the same week in January. And I just wish if you all could talk and just shift your events. And yes, I'd love to do all 3 of your events. They just can't be all at the same time. But long-winded answer to your question, Mary. It's not cut and dry, but how about you? How do you turn down freelance work, and what helps you decide?
So I feel like I've said this since the very beginning, but I still don't know that I really reached the stage where I'm turning down work. And that's a whole other thing I could sidebar on. But yeah, I'm still trying to figure out ways to do things. And so one of those twists so that I'm not turning down freelance work that comes is they are coming, it's freelance. They're coming to work with me, but then I try to sell them on my team. And that has worked sometimes. It hasn't worked other times. And even sometimes I've been like, you could just like meet one of my team members, see if it works, and it serves you better because I might not be available, but they are. So we are more of like a one-stop shop for you, and one of us can freelance that event. And it's the same billing, like you're still billing through me and whatever. So a couple of people have been on that, and then one hasn't. So that's kind of different. If you have a similar business model to me, that's something that might work for you, but it just comes down to rate. Is it then worth my team's time? And so that's the closest that I've gotten to turning it down, in the sense that I'm not doing it, but maybe I'm trying to get somebody else to do it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And again, a benefit of having a team if that's a vision. And I know a lot of folks who start out as freelancers and then build a team around them that continue to do freelance work. So there's a lot of different models. This one is a question I thought was interesting from one of our BepCon 2024 attendees. This is when hiring other freelancers from the perspective of a freelancer, or Mary, you hire freelancers. What are you looking for when it comes to choosing staff to join you on events?
Yeah, so this is once again, it's very particular into what we're doing. I will say before I had a team, I wasn't necessarily hiring too many freelancers. In any cases, maybe I was partnering with people on events, but wasn't really hiring them. So now when I am, it's because we have a gap in our capacity and it's usually on site. And so I'm not necessarily hiring freelancers too much to do pre-event work. It is on-site execution. And so with that in mind, what I'm looking for when I'm choosing who to do that with is who is willing to travel, because a lot of times those will include a little bit of travel, and then who is able to just work on the fly. We have a great episode about what skills every event planner or producer needs, and I feel like that's where I would pull in those skills that we list, because that's where everything comes to a head, right? They need to be organized, they need to be able to work under pressure, especially when they don't have a lot of information about what's happened in the whole planning process. So it's really that person that I can truly throw into a situation and they are professional enough and know enough about events that they're just going to roll with it and make it happen. So that's what I'm looking for in freelancers. And I will say it's a very valuable trait to have if you're a freelancer. So Logan, what about you? You bring in folks a lot as well. So what are you looking for when you're choosing your staff?
Yeah, trust is one, available for the dates. That's the big one, right? And then it's mainly trust. And I have talked about this and I'll continue to say this on the podcast all the time, is a lot of it is unfortunately coming down to who do I trust? Who do I get along with? And are they top of my mind? I have a bad habit of forgetting about people months after. If I haven't worked with an event with you in several months, it's going to be hard for me to think of you when I'm like, "Ooh, I need to bring another stage manager with me to this event. Who am I going to work with?" And I'm definitely going to think of the people that I've worked with most recently in the past couple events, past couple of months, and that's who's going to come to mind for when I'm going to then send out, that offer or that ask to see if they're available. And so if you're someone who's trying to be hired by others, this is where you just need to stay top of mind and remind. I mean, again, the most basic thing, it's probably marketing to some people, but to me, it's like you just need to remind people you exist. You exist, you're good at what you do, and here's what you like to do. Because that's the other part I've realized is some of my go-to people I don't work with anymore. And that's not because they're bad at what they do or something changed. They changed what they're interested in. So they aren't available, or their rates went up a lot more than I could afford, or whatever it was. I have always been looking for new people to work on my events that I trust. And like you said, Mary, can throw into different situations and have different skill sets. I will say all of what I do is very client facing. So anyone I bring on site, if I'm hiring them as a freelancer, they need to be good in front of client in a stressful situation. That's probably the most basic thing they got to be able to do. And then I have different levels of, skills I need them to rely on. But yes, I highly recommend just make sure you keep people top of mind.
I love it. Super great tips, most certainly. So hopefully those are helpful for you all. And we have the next golden question, which we all don't love to talk about. But Logan, taxes. How do you handle these as a freelancer?
Everybody's got to pay taxes, Yeah, this is the less glorious side of being a freelancer. And you do need this as a 101, but I feel like 201, Mary, I really aspire to have like a session, maybe whether it was BepCon or something, where I really just want to get all the other freelancers in the room and be like, let's talk taxes and retirement. How do you guys do this? Because I think there's different ways to do it. We all have to pay taxes. The way I personally do it is I just have to remember Mary writes me a check for $1,000. I don't necessarily get 1,000. I mean, I do in that invoice, but then come tax time, I owe 25, 30%, whatever percentage it is, to the government. So it's not really all my money. And I remember when I first started freelancing, I didn't do that math. I kind of just assumed, because when I'd worked for someone else, my tax payment I had to make come tax time was non-existent. I usually got a refund. And so that hit me pretty hard my first tax bill. So now I'm a lot better these days. And that's how I envision it and why we talk about rates and increasing them, because taxes go up and I need to pay taxes, but so that needs to come out of whatever I'm factoring. So if I'm getting $1,000 from a client, I don't really make $1,000. I make $700 of that. And the way I actually set that up is when that money comes into my bank account, I have sub accounts and I immediately take the money for taxes, immediately goes out before I even pay myself or pay any of my operating expenses. And that has been a really easy way for me to get on top of, I pay quarterly taxes. If you're a US based listener and you are making significant amount of money, you need to be paying quarterly taxes, or you could actually owe extra to the IRS come tax time. Most people who work full time have taxes withheld from their checks they get sent home and their pay stubs, so they don't have to worry about it. But you as a freelancer, you need to think about taxes and be figuring out whatever that percentage is for you. A professional can help you, or searching on the internet of just knowing just how much you need to save come tax time. But I have found a lot of solace in hiring someone who I pay year round to help me manage my books and keep me prepared for taxes. And that took me from being really stressed at like, how big of a bill am I going to get in April, to now I'm pretty much on par. And it's just in my mind, unfortunately, large checks I write every 3 months to the IRS.
Logan, I love what you said so much that I don't really have anything to add. Also, because this is like historically something very confusing for a lot of people. And so I love what you said, doubling down on like, if you need extra support on this and this is confusing for you, like reach out to an accountant, at least for a consultation, and they can help you figure out what you need to do. But to your point, Logan, just don't forget, or yeah, you kind of get screwed over a little bit. So I concur.
Everybody's got to pay taxes. And I should have disclaimed, I am not a tax professional, but if you would like to know who we work with in the Pacific Northwest, you are welcome to send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. Mary and I, we can send you her contact because her team is amazing. So Mary, last question here. What is something you hope to improve this year in your freelancing process? Nice and broad. Any part of the freelancing process, how would you like to improve?
It's such a good question. And honestly, what I would like to do, I might be spinning this in a way we weren't intending, but I would like to build out the list of available freelancers. So if we're talking about gathering a team who can help and working with freelancers, I have some lists. I have multiple lists, different places, all these things. But as I continue to work events, even if I haven't worked with someone directly, I've noticed they're on site at the event. And I'm just like, that is a responsible human. They are making it happen. I want to write them down and remember who they are also, because when you get in a snag, you can know who to refer to. And then, of course, you could build that out more, figure out people's rates, where they're located, all that good stuff. But from my perspective, that's something that would be helpful for me right now. That's what I want to improve. So that's what I'm going to say. Logan, what about you? What's something that you hope to improve this year in your freelancing process?
Yeah, I am slowing myself down on some of my business development activities. So I say being top of mind, I have a pretty good cadence where a couple months before the event, I usually reach out to folks, try to figure out, if they need me or not. And then that helps me know what new business I need to go after. But like I said, I've been in a really good spot with a good cadence of inquiries coming in. And so I'm actually going to be a little more intentional with who I tell I'm available to first. And so that means I'm coming off a really busy spring, and I will say about this time this episode's dropping, I will probably be doing a more concerted effort for the fall, but I am not panicking in the way that in years past I would definitely be fearing that if I didn't have as open of a calendar as I do right now for the second half of the year, I'd be a little more stressed. But I'm actually excited about it because I think it's giving me a moment to slow down, will help me decide exactly what events I really do want to repeat again and who I want to reach out to of like, hey, I actually have more availability than I thought in certain aspects of the fall. So it's exciting. I'm slowing down, opposite of what I'm telling a lot of people to do, but hopefully that resonates with one or two of you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Logan. And it's been a crazy process, this whole freelancing thing. And so don't, baby steps at a time, you'll figure it out. Or maybe you've been doing it for a million years and you could share your learnings with others as well. So thank you for, hearing this conversation today and share your tips and tricks with us as well.
Yes. And Mary, you have our bonus tip this week.
Okay, I do have our bonus tip for today. So lately we've been doing just a lot of maps and layouts for events. And so that's what this one is coming from. So honestly, this may have been a bonus tip way in the past, but it's super relevant for me now and still a wonderful tip. So when you're creating a map, if there's not something that already exists, like let's say you're working with an outdoor space, And so there's not, you can't go into Cvent necessarily and get a diagram that's already measured and things like that. So what do? Many people go and use like a screenshot of Google Maps. That's okay. But one step better, that's still free, is to use Google Earth. So you can get the Google Earth app on your computer, and that gives you different kinds of views. You can also like remove trees if you're working with an outdoor space. And so it's a really great like interactive tool. It also can save you sometimes from doing a walkthrough. You can measure on it. And this is like, really like factual data that you're getting because it's using Google Earth. And so that's just a tip for you. If you want to save yourself a trip or just have more accurate measurements in your map, you can also use Google Earth.
It's a great tip, Mary. I will definitely be using that for some of my outdoor sporting events, just for me to know, if I want to like check in on my venue. So thank you for that bonus tip. That brings us to the end of the episode. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can email us directly at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can always connect with Mary and I directly on LinkedIn. We love hearing from you. So just let us know that you heard about us from the podcast. And if you want more Better Events content, join our private community on Substack. Thanks as always for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.